Hey Edmund,
Hi.
do you mind being on my podcast?
What's your podcast about?
It's about that song New Father.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to be.
Do you remember what it was like to sing into a microphone and do all that stuff?
Well, it was kind of exciting because I felt like I was being included as a grown up instead of just being kind of counted as a kid who
Hmm.
just does his own things with the other little kids and is being taught by the grown-ups. And I felt included and happy because I got to help Uncle Nate, and I liked singing with Daddy and Uncle Nate, and it was fun because I got to do something that I usually didn't get to do.
Hmm. Hmm. That's really beautiful. I loved having you be a part of it.
Well, that I'm very glad that I got to be part of it.
Me too. Me too. Do you remember what you were singing about?
Yes, about thinking things like a child and doing things like a child, and basing my thoughts and reasonings on how I thought and how was thinking kind of like a kid.
Hmm. Is there anything else that you want to share either about the song or anything else?
That I think that Uncle Nate's songs, they've helped me in trusting Jesus and knowing that he is a friend to people who um, like me, who sometimes feel lonely lots of times.
I feel that way too sometimes, Edmund. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of it. Your voice was very necessary.
You're welcome.
Hello and welcome to the Understory Podcast. My name is Lord Sycamore. Today I have with me a really special guest interviewer, my brother-in-law Keith. Hello, Keith.
Hi, Nate, Lord Sycamore. Glad to be on the podcast with you. A number of months ago, you were talking to me about a recording you were doing and asked if I'd be willing to be part of that with my son Edmund for a particular song about being a new father. In being a part of recording the song, I would find it interesting to hear a little more about how the song began. Where did it come from? What were the building blocks?
It's maybe one of the oldest songs on the album. It has a long shelf life. I didn't often think that it was going to be a full song. The song started from an experience I had while I was working down in Florida. I'd just gotten married with my wife and moved down there. And fall 2015, we found out we were pregnant. So all through that year, I'm working in a cafeteria down there in Florida. And part of my job is to get the food and the drinks out of the sun and the outside where they've been delivered and then like down the hallway into the cooler, put them away.
Right.
And we often get these orders at least once a week of these giant like cardboard boxes with bags of milk in them, like
Mm-hmm.
1% whole milk, chocolate milk. And so it's my job to get those from like the back of the cafeteria through the hallway into the cooler before Florida spoils them, the Florida weather. So,
Right, right.
and I'm sweating and struggling and getting those down the hallway. Um, and one of the cartons, probably chocolate milk, if I'm remembering correctly, get it up on the shelf. And I look right there, and everything else that I was thinking about and trying to do, I just forget about because I look and see the expiration date is the same as my son's due date, which is June 13th. I'm like,
Okay.
oh, oh wow. And so for all the rest of that day, as far away as that was, it was, like maybe 2 weeks out or something. Milk keeps a little bit. It just felt so immediate. And all through the day, as I'm going around putting more things away, arranging shelves, I'm just hearing in my head the different sounds that you would hear in a hospital. I'm hearing like the wheels on a gurney, like of my wife being wheeled down to the delivery room or something, and just I start to like make up that song, the very beginning, June 13th part, because of that experience, sort of as a way of like calming myself down, like, it's not so immediate. You have some time to even sing about it, see? Yeah, and I could just picture in my head some crazy music video of
To the soundtrack that you're creating.
yeah, so I very much had, like, an image in my head before I had all the words. So that was just the first verse of the song that I
Okay,
I made during that day,
right.
and then I just sort of sat there with it.
Okay, I liked, you said it had a this was the song with the longest shelf life, and I was immediately thinking of that initial opening there with the milk carton on the shelf. So, of course, the song progresses to various points of the story of being a father, even some, uh, I'll say prophetic, but things that have not yet happened for you. You have the decades past towards the end.
Mm.
So, when did you get back to it? What was the impetus to pick it back up? Why is it on this album?
Yeah, I thought it was a funny song. I shared it with my wife when I got home, she really liked it, but every time I tried to work on it, it just, like, didn't yield itself to me, and so I sort of just rationalized that as, like, I haven't had my kid yet, so I don't know what the next verses would be about, like, I haven't had this experience, but I did hope to add more. What gave me the impetus to keep going on it, we had Solomon, which was a joy, and I was, like, actually in the delivery room with Kate, and it was, nowhere near as bad as my imaginings in the cafeteria, would have led me to believe. Hard, but beautiful, and, when we were about to move, up here to Pennsylvania to take the job at the school, I was playing a show at a little coffee shop in town, and it was sort of like a farewell. I'd played there a couple times before, and a lot of friends, family came, and I played a couple finished songs, and then sort of on a whim, I just told them, "Okay, I've got this little piece of a song. It's not finished. It's not finished,
Mhm.
but here it is." And so I played it and just got up to as far as I had, which was to the line, "Now I'm a new father." And I look up, I'm feeling kind of sheepish about the whole thing. But then I look out and I see like my parents, I see other grown-ups from the church that we've had, people with adult kids, um, and every person had this like special look on their face that I'd never seen before because I hadn't lived in this world of like being a parent, which was a look that basically said, "Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, that was stressful, but yeah, that was special."
Mhm.
And it's also funny to look back on it in the way that you're singing about. So just, like, having that connection with people who'd walked that way before me, it sorta gave me the confidence to just keep this in the back of my mind and not totally throw it out.
So that you picked it up again because of this affirmation that you saw in presenting the initial verse, although you hadn't yet experienced enough to write the next verses.
Yeah, so I would say probably what had to happen, which, like, as a songwriter, I'm very impatient, and I don't often like that.
I think it's more than just songwriters who are impatient, but go ahead.
Um, what I discovered was the next part of the song about what it meant to be a father, like, I just couldn't get there yet because I had so much growing up to do. Basically, when we had to make that decision to move to Pennsylvania, that was one of the biggest decisions we made because it was very much stepping away from, my parents and the job I'd had before and, like, making a, very clear choice in one direction as a family unit, and in large part for the sake of the kids.
Hmm.
And at that point, I was still thinking, I want to be a musician, and I want to write songs, and I want people to know about me. And that was my idea of what life was for. And to then say, actually, I'm not that wise. Actually, I need to grow up, and to do that, I need to be around other people who are wise. Okay, people in the community up in PA, they're some of those people. And actually, I don't have all the resources in myself to provide, like, relationships for my kids, but, Solomon and us move up, he'll have a bunch of cousins.
Hmm.
Thinking in those ways about what was gonna be good for him and what was gonna be good for my wife, and what was probably gonna make more sense career-wise. That was really hard because it to me, it felt kinda like dying, like, I have this thing that I want, and I've got this other thing that I have right now, which is beautiful, my family, and like, I can totally miss that because of this other dream that I have, and I have to make this choice to, like, put the dream down, or rather to say, like, Father God, I trust that, like, you know how you made me and what I'm for, and that, like, this is a good thing you put in my heart, and
Mhm.
you know the shape it needs to take in my life. But you've given me a family, and I need to take care of them, even if that means putting my stuff on hold. That was the kind of growing up stuff that had to happen, and it was super hard. And that's really where the second verse going into the bridge came from. There was these years that went by when we moved up here where I was married and I had my kid and we're living life. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, like, what about this thing that I wanted to do? And the image of like a dog shedding its hairs, I realized it wasn't just that one thing. I'd actually had a whole list of dreams and um, pictures of how my life was going to be that one by one, it felt like they were getting plucked off, and it was kind of unpleasant. And my choices were narrowing and narrowing and narrowing. And I the rub of that was so tough sometimes. I think that the second verse is where I tried to get at like how that got solved for me, or daily, I guess, gets solved for me, which is like when you actually hold your child, when you pick up your son, you recognize like, wow, this tiny thing that I'm holding is actually the most precious thing that I'll ever have or do. It's not going to be those other things. It's like this person right here. What?
Yeah, yeah.
How?
You've gotten a perspective setter. It's correcting a perspective. It's not that the other things you loved or are good at are unimportant, but in comparison, they are beneath this human being made in God's image who is your responsibility.
Hmm,
And that dynamic in the context of a family, yeah, it gives you a focus.
hmm,
Okay, good. Yeah, I was in listening to the song. I was thinking, I see this loss, this laying down. Um, I even wrote the sacrifice or self-discipline for the love of another.
hmm.
Now I'm living for love. Is that in that middle section, or is that the
Yeah.
transition to the third section?
No, that's in the oh, that's in the transition. Yeah, I
Okay,
should mention I appreciate you use the word sacrifice because I use a humorous image of like a dog shedding his hair, and a dog doesn't like sit down
sacrifice,
and
right?
say like, "I'm gonna squirt this stuff out of my skin." It just falls off. But the phrase, "But one by one as I laid them down, as I laid my dreams down."
Hmm.
So it very much was this, yeah, this choice thing to sacrifice. Yeah, going then into the transitional section of the song, the bridge, there's this quote from 1 Corinthians 13 of, "When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child." And that's in the context of him talking about love and how love is like this others-centered, others-focused thing, and it's not about your gifts and it's not about your abilities, it's about your heart set. Jesus shows us what that looks like when he lays down his life on the cross. He says, "Greater love is no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends." That's what I get called into as a child of God. And it's like a hard thing. It's like a passing through death, but there is a resurrection. The words after that come after that quote from 1 Corinthians 13 are, "Love grew me up, love taught me that it's not about me. So now I'm living for love because love set me free." And that phrase, "Love taught me that it's not about me," like the thing that's dying is the sinful self, is that part of you that is really only interested in you and that worships you or the things you love rather than the creator who's forever praised.
Hmm.
It seems like freedom to be able to live however we want and to live only for ourselves. And if there's one thing that having a child teaches you, it's that that doesn't work at all in a family setting. Like, it's just constant chafing. I know this from experience. And on a larger scale, it doesn't work in the family of humanity. Like you think of Cain and Abel, and Cain's question to God after killing his brothers, "Am I my brother's keeper?
Right.
Like, am I supposed to look after him?" And the answer is yes. You're responsible for every other person. We're all brothers in being made in the image of God. And then in being in Christ, when he gives us that pattern of dying to ourselves and living to God and living for the good of other people, that's the resurrection I'm talking about.
Right.
On the other side of that difficult move from self and death to love and life is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
The whole world and the whole course of your life is just it's open to you when the reason you're living is to love other people and to love God.
Right.
I invited you to record with me the bridge part, and I wanted to ask you what you remembered about recording the bridge.
I was uh, I'd never done recording for anything at all, semi-professionally or whatever before. Just a cassette deck as a kid, but that was it. Um, so it was exciting, neat to be part of it as you explained the story and what you intended to do with the tracks that you were recording. Uh, I just thought it was artistically really clever to have your voice and then to put in that bridge. I know in the final version you had a baby. Was it your baby or did you
It's
have
Solomon, I
it is
think, at
Solomon.
7 days old. Yeah, he's
Okay,
he's got a little clip of him crying.
right. So there was that, and then you have my son sing, and then you add mine in on top of or underneath with that. So there's this progression of infancy to adulthood.
I really wanted to thank you for doing it because your voice was so beautiful. What I'm trying to get at in that moment is
Mhm,
actually the son who's grown up and the father who's been singing all along, they're now singing together in this
mhm,
bridge part. Love set me free, free, free. Um, and the growing up has happened like instantaneously, but it has ended up with the relationship, I guess, that he hoped for of love. So thank you for lending your voice to um, making an audio picture of that like loving relationship.
yeah, no, glad to do it. We have touched on the anxiety pre-child, the excitement or refocus of perspective change of having a new child. You develop this forward-thinking uh, decades past. The third section of your song goes into a part that neither you or I have yet experienced, but we have known others who have. What were you doing? What were you drawing on? Flesh that out a
Yeah.
little bit, maybe.
The main thing I was drawing on was the looks on the faces of my parents and the other older people back in the day when I first premiered the song at the coffee shop.
Hmm.
They had very experienced look on their face. They'd been through all the things I was talking about and more, and they were coming near the end of their journey as parents. And many of them came up and said to me afterwards just how fast the time went. And so I had that in the back of my head even as I started becoming a father.
Yep.
Um, this is going to go so fast, and I need to pay attention.
Everyone says it. They'll be grown up before you know it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that really like nailed it down though was when I was spending some time in Psalm 103, and it's got that part about as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. For he knows how they are formed. He remembers that they are dust. The life of mortals is like grass. They flourish like a flower of the field. The wind blows over it,
Hmm.
and it is gone, and its place remembers it no more.
Yeah.
And that image of grass coming up and being gone, it's like, "Oh, yeah, that like, naturally speaking, that is what, um, I am, and that is what my son is, and that is what our relationship is." And if I don't sober up and get the fear of God and
Mm,
see that this has been given to me as a picture of an eternal reality, then I will be in despair when those decades have passed. I'll look
mhm.
back and say, what was it for if it's all going away and there's nothing left?
Yeah.
And even as like that verse moves on and says like, did I love him well? Did I has he known it? And I'm sort of looking back and reflecting on, did I actually take action and live a life of love like I knew I was called to? It wraps up with just assurance because I didn't want older people to listen to this song or me to listen to this song in a couple decades, God willing, and say like, "Oh man, I blew it," and just think
Hmm.
of all the failures. It's like, no, no, that's not the point because you've only ever been an incomplete picture of fatherhood. And the way the Psalm 103 goes is, but from everlasting to everlasting, the Lord's love is with those who fear him, and his righteousness with their children's children, with
Yeah.
all those who remember to obey his covenant and keep his precepts. The whole thing of children having children, which God willing, I'll get to see with my own children, that fruitfulness there is beautiful, but again, it's only a picture of and I guess the place for God's love and how it's gonna move through our generations. Like, he is so big, and he's so strong, and he's so loving, and when he loves me and I love him back, like, it just opens up the way for that love to flow his love to flow through me to my son, and then like, it's easier just for the pattern to keep going of people opening up their hearts to God and receiving his love, and I put that line there in the song about, the Son of God laid down his life for my pardon, because the Bible tells us that we're like we're slaves to sin and we're separated from God, we're his enemies, we've got this total self-focused heart set, but when Jesus dies on the cross, he frees us from that. He puts to death that whole old way of being and he opens up a new way. And for all of us who follow him, like that's an eternal way. Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And he's still alive. Like I'm gonna die, and Jesus is still gonna be alive. And
Hmm.
my son's gonna die, and Jesus is still gonna be alive.
Right.
If we're reborn in our spirits and we become children of God, whatever happens with my relationship with my son, there's so much I can't control. But God is in control. And if I reach out to him in faith, he's not going to reject me. He's going to say, "You're my child forever." And that that to me is the whole point of the song. The whole thing that it came down to is like, I'm going through this journey, but I know even when I get to the end of it, I'm gonna be home. I'm still gonna have a father who I'm never gonna grow up or get bigger than, or
Hmm.
have to worry about putting in a nursing home someday, like, or taking care of when he's old. Like, that God is always gonna be the one taking care of me. And in fact, this was where I was planning to end the album,
Hmm.
was at this song because
Hmm.
that last line, "My everlasting Father," I thought really got at, like, what it means to come home. It's to recognize God goes on forever and ever, and when I'm his child, so do I.
And it answers some of that nostalgic longing for a return to our childhoods, those of us that had happy ones and have many fond memories of things we did as kids with our parents. And yeah, but it
Yeah,
has its full answer in that forever child.
right, yeah. There's no going back to the childhood we had. For some of
Right.
us, that's good, for some of us,
Yeah.
that's sad, but there's always going deeper with God and going further into the home that's God.
The home we've longed for is really the one at the end,
Yeah,
and it's only the one in the past as it has reflected the one at the end more perfectly.
right, yeah.
So the one at the end is the fulfillment again, back to shadows and types.
And pictures and
Yeah.
sacraments, whatever,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, dim reflections in a mirror, yeah,
Right.
all of these ideas, that I play with or wrestle with in the album of, like, being a lover and being a father and having a home, like, the more that I actually dug into what are these things and what does my experience about them and what does the scripture say about them, what came out again and again was like all of these things are pictures of Christ, and he is a real person that I can come to now,
Mhm.
and that's why I was so happy with how the song came out because I felt like it could tell that story of a life basically of from the perspective of father and still say like and it was good.
Hmm.
It was a good thing because it pointed me to the one who is good.
Yeah.
The thing that helped me finish the song was a songwriting competition by Mason Jar Music. It was either back in 2017 or 2018. That challenge, I think, helped me to bring together all of the words and the music, and there was just the piano part, basically what you hear through the finished track, um, but with nothing else accompanying it.
Mhm.
In terms of how the song wrapped up, I had a version of this that I was going to put on the final album, which was basically just piano and voice. Um, and as I tried to do more things with it, it was all too straight. It was too normal. There's just like drums, bass, piano kind of stuff. And my wife listened to the words and she said, "Listen back to that again. You're talking about milk expiring and you're talking about dog hairs falling off, and the music is a little too normal. You need to be goofy. You need some trombones or something."
Mhm.
And so her saying that to me just brought to my attention just like how, I don't know, much of a musical theater piece almost this song is in compressed form, and gave me the, I guess, the license to um, really be very playful with the musical colors and the different instruments I was using.
Yeah.
And I really got through like almost the whole orchestra by the time I was done working on that, along with some electronic things in
Sure, sure.
the central part. Yeah.
No, the final version is a very fun sound without
Yeah.
obscuring the richness that's there. It was done well.
That's good.
Two other things, quotes from places that I thought of. You said, "Our fatherhood is an incomplete picture of fatherhood." And I remember reading somewhere that one of the first things you have to do in thinking about fatherhood is forgive your own father. Even if you had the best of fathers, there's that idea that you have to recognize it's an imperfect thing and you forgive your own father. And then, of course, accept God's forgiveness of you for all of your own failings. Not that you give up your responsibilities, but uh, that forgiveness is a very important part. Uh, Another sermon I heard, he said, "I have come to do the will of the Father." And then the pastor asked, "What is the will of the Father?" And pulled another verse, and I don't have them in my head. I'm sorry. The will of the Father is to bring many sons to glory. The will of the Father is to have many sons, and Jesus was an obedient son in bringing many sons to glory.
Yeah. And so the nature of the Son of God, I think, was really also very important in teaching me what it meant to be a son of God, because what Jesus is talks about in John 1 with him being the word, he's with God and he was God. He was with God from the beginning.
Hmm.
And so this relationship of father to son is unbroken and continuous, with the exception of, at the cross where that gets torn apart so that we
Hmm.
can enter in. But that idea of it being continuous eternally, understanding that that is what God has called me into union with Christ with, is that eternal relationship of being a son of God. It's a very different picture than the one that makes me very afraid without God in the picture, which is like, I'm gonna have this child, but I don't know what's gonna happen, and like we could stop being friends, or he could die, or I could die, and in some ways our relationship is gonna get pulled apart in a
Hmm.
natural sense. But God can hold on to me even when I'm brown grass and then I'm no grass. The natural is precious to God, but He doesn't rely on it
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
to sustain me, or our relationship. And
Praise his name.
yes, exactly, exactly. And that's also why the invitation to die to myself, um, is bigger than just like, is it going to be good for my son? Like ultimately, what I'm being set free from is not just like being selfish in some moralistic sense, but just the whole system of old creation, of it,
Hmm.
like everything is going to die,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
everyone except for my soul. when when I when I believe in Jesus and I accept that what he says is true and that he's Lord, and that's astonishing, and that's true freedom. it's a partly cloaked freedom now, and a freedom you have to sort of wade your way through a bunch of incomplete pictures to get at. Incomplete in the sense of us living them out incompletely, not
Sure.
in the sense of God's word about them being incomplete. Um,
Our experience of it is incomplete. It has not yet
right,
come to pass.
right, right. But the goodness of holding my son in my arms is a good foretaste of that good future and that full freedom that we're going to have when all creation is liberated from its bondage to decay and the sons of God are revealed in all their glory, when we are what we will be, which only God knows. For now, we know we're children of God, and that is a good place to be. So,
Yeah. Well, on that note, I think I'm going to go hug all three of my children and tell them I love them. and no, thank you. Seriously, it was good to be reminded of those things. So thanks.
likewise, brother, thank you for taking the time. I love you.
Love you too.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please consider purchasing my music or donating to this work through my Patreon. Either way, I hope this was a gift to you and that you were encouraged by it. Have a good day, and God bless.